Hail, hail, the Celts are here, and what the hell do we care now? We're on the road back to Hampden. We've got a semi-final, we've got a treble to unlock, to fulfil, to bring home, however you want to think of it. And the Hoops are coming into this game, in the ascendancy. It feels like over the Kilmarnock match and certainly, really the last couple of games, maybe the last St Johnstone match aside, that, we're getting into the sharp end of the season. We're seeing the form of Daisa Maeda really rise to the fore, as well as last week seeing Carter Vickers zing one in from his own half. It felt like at the time. There's a lot of good things going on at Celtic at the moment as we look to just get business done and bring that treble over the line. In the video today, we're going to preview the semi-final, the return match against St Johnstone, where Brendan Rodgers and the boys are definitely out for revenge. They're definitely out to settle the score, and they're definitely out to make their way all the way to the final of the Scottish Cup at Hampden towards the end of the season. At any point in the video today, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and get into the comment section of this video. And I want to see score projections. I want to see shouts for who's going to be player of the match, who's going to be writing the headlines all over this game. As always, the comment section on this channel is on fire, and some of your predictions, some of your hot takes, guys, are off the hook, and so many of them are coming in now, which is great to see. But yeah, let's just get stuck straight into this one, because at that point of recording, we've just had the Brendan Rodgers press conference, and Brendan's in good mood. He's in good kind of confident spirit around the squad, and even Taylor. We can talk about that in the video, as well as maybe Adamida and one or two other bits and bobs. But just to remind you all before we get stuck right into it, this is how it looked last time we played St Johnstone. We went to McDermott Park. They gave us 3/4 of the stadium or whatever. We thought we might have been going there for a title party the way fixtures went. Obviously we didn't quite get the job done beforehand, and if you needed your memory refreshed, St Johnstone's sucker punch early on in the game with Balodis here getting a goal, and an absolute hero performance from the goalkeeper got St Johnstone the 1-0 victory. But to cast your mind back to this game, Jeffrey Schlupp subbed off at half-time, Nicholas Kuhn subbed off at half-time, and although Celtic in the second half definitely went up a gear or two, definitely did huff or puff a little bit more, didn't quite break down the St Johnstone door, there was certainly improvement seen in the second half, and it felt like the manager really brought that in to the Kilmarnock game. And coming into this one, we still have just as many question marks over what the predicted team, or what the team will be, what we're going to predict for the lineup. We've got some of the same questions coming out over and over again, but I think for a semi-final in Hampden, you probably eliminate some of the runners and riders and the potential players a little bit quicker than what we maybe would normally do for the league matches. But I'm not too sure it's quite the case for defence on this one. Last time we were at Hampden, Austin Trusty subbed off at half-time from Liam Scales, and Scales against Kilmarnock really showed everything that he gives to the squad where Austin Trusty maybe lacks. And I'm really split on these two. I could see Scales starting this one just on form and all that kind of thing, having that power, having that driving ability to get up, and the familiarity of Scales on the same side of the pitch as maybe Taylor. We'll get to left back in a second, but certainly Reo Hatate. It just felt like the harmony came back into the side. We felt a lot more synced up, and it just felt that a lot more of the patterns of play that we had against Kilmarnock, where we racked up more completed passes than anyone has ever done in the history of football, I think is what the stat went. And Brendan loves paper cuts, death by 1,000 paper cuts, proper tiki-taka football. So I think like that synergy, that harmony, could see Scales come in. But with the Hampden pitch being that kind of big size that it is, we know St Johnstone are going to bank into their own half and we're going to dominate possession again. The recovery pace of Trusty might just be what the manager edges for. So I'm not sure this one is quite a clear-cut decision as what you might think on the surface level based on the performances of the last couple of games. I think on form, on harmony, you probably bring Scales into this one. But if you do think that the team is going to be camped on the halfway line, particularly in the opening hour of the match or whatever, as we get into a winning position, hopefully, and try and dominate the match, you might want Austin Trusty for that recovery pace. So it'll be interesting to see. I could easily imagine you give Scales the Kilmarnock game knowing you're going to bring Trusty back in again to kind of rest him up and give him a bit of time to recalibrate and reset after a kind of patchy period of form. So I'm still quite jury's out on the centre-backs. Maybe double back to this in a second as we see how the chips fall across the rest of the team. Because Jeffrey Schlupp was doing the inverted fullback role in a couple of matches recently, and against St Johnstone he was very pedestrian at doing it. He was just kind of coming inside here and just kind of holding position. And in the St Johnstone match and in the Kilmarnock match, Greg Taylor reminded everyone, we even heard Brendan Rodgers mention it, in the press conference that in pre-season he was in the number 10 role. And again, for viewers of this channel, this is what we expect from Greg Taylor in the inverted fullback role, is not just to be in here holding hands with McGregor and getting the ball off the fullbacks, but he pops up in the final third. He's the overload player. He's a wild card element that when teams are banking in, going man for man, two deep lines, not much space to play within, you need a guy that's just going to take a marker with him or just overload some space, or take somebody's eye off, Reo Hatate, and they watch out for Taylor, then Hatate can get the ball, that sort of thing. And I think in the big Hampden pitch, again, maybe you could have Schlupp in here for recovery pace, but I think the synergy in the attack that Taylor gave, and with the development that maybe there's a break, maybe there's a development in the Taylor contract negotiation, we might see him, I think we will see him come back in to start this one. In midfield is where I was kind of meaning a little bit more, where we could probably eliminate some players pretty easily, like McCowan and Bernardo are not going to start this game. I think the midfield does quite pick itself, but the forward line still has some questions around it. I would be surprised if Forrest did start this one, but otherwise, and Quinny didn't make the bench in the last game. I think it was borderline criminal, and I would be very surprised if he didn't get on the bench in this one as a result, because again, if we are going to loan Quinny out next year, Brendan does seem to have like a high opinion of him. Bringing him at Hampden for a semi-final, even if he doesn't get on the pitch, of course we want to see him get on the pitch at some point, as long as the game is going the way we would expect it to. He's not going to start, but I hope to see him on the bench for this one. But between the four forward players, it's the same kind of question, the same kind of problem we had last time. Now, Kuhn was a big question mark coming into the Kilmarnock match, and he didn't start, and it was wee Jimmy that actually started that game. And Jota didn't start that match either. We got Adam Ida, we got wee Jimmy, and we got Dyson out in the wide areas. And, does Brendan stick with that? It's hard to say, because it did feel that match would have suited Ida from the start, and he didn't really get into the game. I'm very surprised, again, if you've seen the reaction video, I'm very surprised he gets subbed off at the 60-minute mark. But again, I think he probably didn't quite do enough in that match to change Brendan's kind of natural order, as it were. And having Jota and Kuhn kind of out the limelight, out the firing line for the early stages of that game, these are both big game players, and I think you want Dyson through the middle to start this game because of the bigger pitch. Really, if St Johnstone do come out of their own half, really give them some big problems. If they are going to try and play short, force them to play long, and let us try and I think we go Scales. If we force them to play long, we want Scales up in the air, winning those first and second balls and trying to get the ball down for us. And I think, this is probably the way we start the game, with Ida, wee Jimmy, Bernardo, hopefully Johnny Kenny, maybe Schlupp or McCowan, these kind of guys facilitating the game later on as it goes. I think this is a game where, like I mentioned before, I think it was in the aftermath of the St Johnstone game, we've seen with Aberdeen that normally some of these teams come up with a nice ingenious way of trying to get a result against us, against Celtic, and sometimes they get alright with it. They get a draw, or maybe they beat us. These things have happened, of course, but the next time we play them, they've kind of played their wild card, they've played their shrewd manoeuvre, and we've kind of cottoned on to it by that time. And because these squads generally are a bit thinner on different dynamics, not necessarily quality, but different options and different variety of qualities in their squad, once they've shown their hand, they can't really play that game against us twice. It being at Hampden, I think, changes the setting with it a little bit as well. But St Johnstone have won more cups than anyone else in Scotland this millennium, I think, outside of Glasgow or whatever. Of course, famously the Cup double a few years ago, and a few years prior to that had won the League Cup or something as well. So I'm not too sure there's many of the squad still living there, but same way as us as Celtic fans go into the Champions League saying we belong to be here and we're a historic club or whatever, St Johnstone and St Johnstone fans are looking at Scottish Cup competitions, the Scottish Cup in particular, saying we shouldn't be, we go to Hampden, we're kind of used to this, and we'll give Celtic a game. They'll have confidence after beating us 1-0, and the manager will be certainly at the drawing board trying to find another solution. But the form we've seen of Hatate at the weekend, the space we're going to play in, how familiar we are at Hampden, how good Brendan has been at Hampden, I don't think this game, there's much question about what way it's going to go. It's going to be a matter of how many for me. Will we have Sinisalo? It's probably one of the questions we've not really had answered in the press conference, and I've kind of forgotten about it until right now. But will we have Sinisalo back for this game again? Will Schmeichel return? I'm not too sure. I think if Schmeichel was going to return, there might have been something about that in the press conference. Maybe they'd have seen something in training. The journals would have asked about it. Brendan might have offered it up there. Who knows? But that's maybe a bit of an unknown. Maybe a surprise in the making to see who's going to be in goals for this one. But either way, Sinisalo's not had, I'm pretty sure he's not had a clean sheet yet. I would love to see him get a clean sheet. And I think if this is the team that we go out with, a clean sheet is possible at Hampden. Because if we get a goal or two up, I could see a team like St Johnstone, who have bigger fish to fry in their eyes, league safety is very much on the menu for them still. maybe down in tools a little bit, maybe just lose their motivation for the game. And hopefully we can get a clean sheet. And again, the form we've seen of Hatate, Engels is due a big performance as well. And if we do start with the wingers a bit fresher, this could be a very monumental game. Aberdeen drew with us 2 each, and then we took them in a semi-final and hammered them 6-0. And I think this is what we're looking at again this weekend. I'm going to predict Celtic 5, St Johnstone 0. And I think this is probably going to be the Hatate show. I did say at the weekend I would have thought Taylor might have done something, and he did. But I think Hatate, having scored 2 goals against Kelly, almost got a hat-trick. I think he is really in top gear right now. He'll enjoy the space. And if he does have this front three to play with, I think this semi-final is going to have Hatate's name written all over it. Now, earlier this week, we dropped episode 5 of our scouting series, trying to profile different players that Celtic could be looking at in the summer transfer window. In this week's episode, we went to Spain, of course. Those episodes drop every Wednesday, usually at 5 o'clock. This week, I've been on holiday, so it was a little bit later, but it still went out on Wednesday. If you haven't caught it yet, or that any episodes from that entire series, it will still keep running, so there's still more episodes to come. I highly recommend, if you've missed it, checking it out, because the feedback and the response to it has been electric. I've had a lot of fun making it. You guys have had a lot of fun watching it. On screen now is some other stuff that we've made on the channel that YouTube thinks you might enjoy, so feel free to check it out, of course. Don't forget to drop your comments down below, score predictions, man of the match shouts, all that good stuff. If you haven't done so already, please do like, subscribe, share and retweet and all that good stuff. If you're going to the game, have a good time, travel safe, stay out of trouble, all that good stuff. Hail, hail, and mon the hoops.